All right. Good morning, everybody. Sorry about that. Um, show me active speaker and optimize. Unfortunately, the settings don't stay through when you stop and start sharing. So I just have to do that again. All right. So today we're discrimination training, um, and kind of what that looks like for applied behavior analysis. And as I was preparing this training, I came to realize how huge this is. I don't think that I had ever considered quite how much discrimination training is kind of like everything that we do. Um, and maybe you already knew that, maybe you did not, but yeah, so pretty exciting to to go through this training and kind of get myself ready for it. So some quick housekeeping reminders. Um, so if you do talk during the training, remember not to use any client information of any kind. That's names, initials, identifying information, because it is being recorded and potentially shared with people who should not have access to any of that. So we have to be really careful about that. We are recording, so stay on mute unless you're talking to the group, and there will be a couple times where I might ask you to throw something in the chat or to unmute and kind of call out an answer. Probably I will ask you to think of an answer, and then I'll ask someone to unmute and answer because I can't read the chat from where I am. So we'll probably do it that way. Reminder that you must complete the post test in order to get credit. So those links are sent out at some point after the training. With Ashley being off for a little while, I don't know if they'll go out right away, but hopefully. And make sure you listen for the code words because this is a longer training. There are 4 of them today. So make sure you're writing down all 4 of the code words. And remember that the test is multiple choice. So as long as you hear them and know what they are, basically, you don't have to worry about spelling them exactly correctly. And then just a reminder that the information is only as valuable as you make it. So the application of the information in the training is really the most important thing. So as you're listening to the training, make sure that you are thinking about how you can use it, how it applies to what you're doing. All right, so you're going to see these pictures many times this morning. This is for those of you watching later. Today is October 31st, 2025. So today is Halloween. So this is a slightly Halloween themed training. That'll make more sense to those who are attending live and less to those who are watching, potentially a month from now or 3 months from now. But you're going to see these pictures quite a lot. So you don't have to answer out loud. I'd actually rather you don't. But I would like you just to kind of look at these and in your head answer the question, what are these? Okay, so just kind of think, what are these? What are these? And we're gonna come back to this a lot as we go through. And I'm not gonna tell you what they are yet, but I will in a moment. So let's get some buy-in here. Why are we having this training? Let's talk about what happens if you can't discriminate. Okay, and remember that we're talking about discrimination in terms of behaviorism and applied behavior analysis. Discrimination has really taken on a very negative connotation in our society, but that is a version of what we're going to talk about, but that is really not what we are primarily talking about. We're talking about being able to discriminate between any 2 things or between any number of things. So what happens if you're unable to do what we're going to talk about? Well, you're going to hurt other people's feelings. You're not going to know what to say and what not to say. You're not going to know when to show up and when not to show up. So you're going to end up with a lot of people whose feelings are hurt, and your feelings are going to be hurt as well. You're going to be rejected socially because you won't know how to act in any situation whatsoever. Right? That's really, like, if you can't discriminate what to do and what not to do, what to say and what not to say, how to react and how to not react, you're you're not going to be a successful part of any kind of social circle. You're not going to be able to learn anything because you're not going to be able to discriminate between what's correct and what's incorrect. So you're not going to be able to kind of intake any of that. We're going to talk about that repeatedly. Just general failure, right? The more successful we feel, kind of the better we the more and more success that generates. So if you're unable to discriminate between things, you're just kind of generally going to fail at most tasks in life. So this is the repercussions of not having good discrimination, and that's why what we do really focuses on this discrimination training. So probably back when I showed you this picture and I said, "What are these?" Either you were like, "I have no idea what these are," or you said, "Oh, they're stormtroopers." Well, you were half right. Okay, so one of these is a stormtrooper and one of these is a clone trooper. And throughout the course of this training, you're actually right now, you're going to learn how to discriminate, but then we're going to continue to look at different examples because I think it's fun and cool. And I also have a clone trooper costume that some of you might have seen before. And I always get called a stormtrooper. So you will not make that mistake again, because by the end of this training, you will really be great at discriminating between clone trooper and stormtrooper. So they are written the same way that they are presented. So the clone trooper is on the left and the stormtrooper is on the right. And you might be thinking, Rob, these look the same to me. Or you might be thinking, oh, I do notice some differences. And some of those differences that you notice might be the actual stimuli that you should be noticing, and some of them might not be. So I'm going to teach you the really easy way to determine if it's a clone trooper or stormtrooper. So you might be looking at the blasters, their guns, and thinking, oh, they're different. That's not the key, actually. You might be looking at their shoulder armor. It's different. It is different, but that's not what you want to look at either, because different versions of stormtroopers and clone troopers will not have that distinction. So what you want to focus on is the very top of their helmet. Okay, so on the left, you see that the clone trooper has what we call a fin or a mohawk, and the stormtrooper on the right has a smooth dome. Okay, nothing there. So that's the first thing you're going to look at when you want to discriminate between the two. And the second thing you're going to look at is the visor area. Okay, so the eyes of the helmet. So you'll notice that the clone trooper has what we call a T visor, and the stormtrooper has what looks more like two eyes. Okay. So as we go through this training and we look at other things, that's really the discriminative stimuli that tells you which is which. So that's where, you would be teaching a person to orient so that they can tell the difference. So, we're using kind of a silly example, although I think it's pretty fun and cool, and I think it's important. So at least, the people watching this will stop calling me a stormtrooper when I'm dressed as a clone trooper. But this, applies to everything. What is the difference that you want to point out so that people are getting their discriminations correct? Whether that be, cow versus horse, like what is it they want to look at? Both of them have a back, both of them have a tail that looks fairly similar. So what would you want them to be looking at? So a horse has a mane and a cow does not. A cow can have horns, whereas a horse cannot, unless it's a unicorn. Oh boy, now we're getting complicated. But anyway, these are the points that you want to attend to. Now that you know that clone troopers have a fin or a mohawk and stormtroopers don't, and clone troopers have a T visor. Okay, so you see how it's like, across and then down, and a stormtrooper never does. Now you can always determine the difference between which one is a clone trooper and which one is a stormtrooper. All right, so we have to talk about stimulus control, and this is a representation of me biting my nails because stimulus control is such a huge concept that at its heart is kind of easy, but as you think about it more, it gets more complicated. So it just makes me nervous talking about it. It's kind of a running gag for those of you who know. All right, so let's start here with an example of stimulus control. Okay, so I show you this picture and I say, go, right? So what would you do after seeing this? Okay, and I could have you guys answer, but I'll just say what some people might do. Some people might say, I don't know. What do you want me to do, Rob? I have no idea. Some people might throw up this symbol that Spock is showing, or some people might say, live long and prosper. Okay, so this is an old sci-fi reference. So that's Spock from Star Trek. And this is the Vulcan kind of hand sign of live long and prosper, which is kind of hard for some people to do. But once you train yourself, you can make these fingers kind of isolate themselves. But so why would you have said that? Well, there's kind of two discriminative stimuli, which again we're going to kind of talk about more in a moment. But you have two primary discriminative stimuli in this case, or SDs. You've got Spock down there showing live long and prosper, and you have my cue here of go, right? So those things were the reasons or why someone might answer those things. And if you said, I don't know, or I'm not sure what to do, Rob, well, the discriminative stimuli for that were you were shown, go, which tells you you're supposed to do something. But looking at this picture, you do not have, the discrimination to be able to know what to say or what to do when you see the picture. So you don't have that discrimination in this case of what you want, but you have the skills to say, I don't know. All right, so let's look at a more common example. All right, so here we have this boy. An airplane flies through the sky. He points and he says, airplane. Okay, so now I would like someone to unmute perhaps and say what was the discriminative stimuli, or what was the reason, what made the child say airplane and point at the airplane?
He saw the airplane in the sky.
Yes, good. Well done, Chelsea. He saw the airplane in the sky, right? Like, if there were no airplane in the sky, right, he probably would not call out airplane, and he probably would not point. Okay, there's one more. We haven't learned about this. We're going to learn about this as we go through, but there's one more thing present that made the boy point and say airplane. Is anybody picking up on that?
His parents.
Oh, Megan, you brilliant person. Yes, his parents, right? Because so a discriminative stimuli tells us that reinforcement is possible and present. Okay, so he might still have pointed up at the airplane and said airplane even without his presence parent. Nope, his parents present. There we go. But the presence of his parents, right, makes reinforcement more available in this time, right? They might be like, oh, you're so smart, or, oh, I love that you answered that, or that's right, it is an airplane, or they might have just smiled, right? But I want to point out here, just in case I forget to say it later, a lot of things that we do, the reinforcement is like the feeling of success, right? So naming something correctly. So if the parents were not present in this picture, and the child still, looked up at the airplane and pointed and said airplane, or even just thought to himself like, there goes an airplane, or, oh, airplane, that still might happen, right? Like, we still identify things, even when other people aren't present, just because it kind of feels good to get something correct. So I wanted to point out both of those things. And Megan, I'm so proud of you for picking up on that. But I also want to say that sometimes it will, happen without it. So this is when I read Skinner's verbal behavior book. This was the thing that really blew my mind, that I had just never considered before, and I think it's really fun to think about, is this idea that you can do, and I think millions is actually off. It can't be infinite, I don't think, but it might be billions or trillions or even more things, right? So think about all the things that as an adult you're capable of doing. You can say countless words, right? Like hundreds of thousands of words, and you can put them in any combination, right? You can say all these thousands of words, but you can flip the order. You can say them nonsensically. You can say them in long combinations. So think about all the combinations of that, and then think about all the actions you can do, right? So, you can put two fingers together, you can jump, you can turn around, you can smell, you can, nod your head back and forth, and you can nod your head back and forth in like 1,000 different ways, right? And you can think countless thoughts. So you can do like literally billions or trillions of things, maybe even more, right? When combinations come down to it. So why aren't you doing all of those things right now? Why are you doing what you're doing, which is probably listening, or, I can see Chelsea. So resting her chin on her, now she's no longer doing that, but she was resting her chin on her hand, right? Like, why are you doing the things you're doing and not all of those other things, right? Why aren't you running to the fridge? Why aren't you pointing up in the sky and saying airplane? Why aren't you, brushing your teeth? Why aren't you saying, tic-tac-toe? So, we could go on like that literally forever, but why aren't you doing all those other things? Well, the answer to that is stimulus control. Okay. So there's nothing in your environment right now triggering all of those things that you can do. There is in your environment right now something hopefully triggering your listening, kind of your listening action, whatever behaviors go into listening. Okay. So you're probably not screaming at the top of your lungs and singing karaoke and all those sorts of things because you need to listen. Your speakers are probably on so that you can hear me, right? So you've got all these kind of things that you need to do in order to listen. You might be, hopefully you're also thinking like, oh, this really applies to what I do. So all these kind of things that go into like good training behavior, because there's a training in front of you and you hear Rob's voice, talking about stormtroopers and clone troopers, and you see the other people, you see Chelsea listening attentively. So that's Chelsea, you're going to get picked on a lot because for some reason you're the only person that I can see. I can't see myself, so hopefully there's nothing on my face or whatever. But so you see Chelsea listening attentively, so you're like, oh yeah, that's what she's doing, so that's what I should do too. So I think it's just fascinating that we have trillions of things that we can do, and our environment chooses the thing that we're doing at any given time, right? So like when something, like that whole bank, this tremendous, word action thought bank in our brain is constantly being accessed, and you're pulling out of this cauldron of trillions of things and doing the one that's right? So you're discriminating constantly. Both sometimes it's a little bit more advertent on, purposeful, and sometimes it's really just your brain doing it automatically. Thank goodness, because boy, oh boy, if you had to like pick all of these things all the time, especially things like breathing and heart pumping and things like that, you'd be in real trouble. Like, oh, now I need to digest, and then you do the action that digests food. That would be really, really distracting. So let's talk about stimulus control. Okay, so stimulus control occurs when the rate, latency, duration, or amplitude of a response is altered in the presence of an antecedent stimulus. Okay, so what on earth does that mean? It just means that when there is a stimulus present, okay, it makes a behavior, right, a response, more likely to happen at all, more likely to happen more, okay, more likely to happen quicker or longer or stronger. Okay, so sometimes it doesn't necessarily, just because, I showed you guys the picture of Spock throwing up live long and prosper. Now, maybe, some of you are real Trekkies and you immediately, also did it, or you immediately said in your head, live long and prosper, or you said like, oh, look, it's Spock. But probably a lot of you looked at that picture and had no idea what was going on. So, that stimulus control varies from person to person based on your history. And, even if you knew, now you're like this, stimulus control in a training environment, until I say like, okay, unmute yourselves and say say what you see, stimulus control at that point, you might have known it was live long and prosper, but you might not have said it. Okay. Because even though some of the environment was saying you should say it, some of the environment was saying that you're not sure, you shouldn't say it. So it doesn't necessarily mean like, okay, when you see an airplane in the sky, you're going to point and say airplane. Sometimes you might, sometimes you might not. Okay. But it does alter that chance that you would do it. Okay. So stimulus control really is what decides what, when you do what you do. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. So then we have to talk about these three terms. And I promise this is the only, I'm pretty sure, I mostly promise that this is the only slide that is just kind of a wall of definitions. The rest is a little bit more, interactive, hopefully. Lower in there. And if people pop in, I think you probably. It muted me. How did I get muted? That's weird. Can you hear me now? Chelsea, yes. Can you hear me?
I think I did that. Back.
Oh, you muted me? It shouldn't let you mute me.
I was trying to let Lori in.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for doing that. And hopefully you didn't lose anything important. Yeah, some people thought it started at 7:30. So Lindsay hopefully will be joining us in a second. But no worries. All right. You can go back and watch the beginning part once the recording comes out. All right. So back to stimulus control. Like I said, this is the only like definition heavy part of the training. But so discriminative stimuli, or the SD, okay, so big S, little d hanging up in the air. This is what tells us that reinforcement is available. Okay. So it's based on our history. Okay. So in the past, when this has happened, we did something and that produced reinforcement. Okay. So, this tut tut, it looks like rain, which is one of my favorite Winnie the Pooh episodes of all time. But, why do you open an umbrella? Okay. You open an umbrella because it's raining. Okay. So rain signals the reinforcing value of an umbrella. In this case, it would be negative reinforcement, right? Because you'd be removing the wetness, the feeling of wetness, or the wetness of your clothes or your hair or whatever it might be. So when it starts raining, okay, that increases the likelihood that you will open your umbrella. Okay, increases the likelihood that you will open it quickly and leave it open, right? So it's impacting the rate, latency, duration. But it's really signaling that reinforcement is available. Okay, so it starts raining, you open up the umbrella. Okay, you see the green light on the traffic light, and you go. You hear me say, okay, guys, please respond, and you respond. All right, so discriminative stimuli is really what's choosing your behaviors and this is such a huge concept, right? Like we just talked about the trillions of things that you're capable of doing. So it's often multiple things, right? So it's, the presence of the picture and my word saying, okay, what is this? and that you see that my hand is holding a Skittle, so that reinforcement is present. So all of those things add up to you then saying, Christopher Robin, or whatever the question might be, or whatever the stimulus being evoked is. So that discriminative stimuli, that SD, is really what determines our behavior. It says reinforcement is available. It says this is what we should do. Okay, so the stimulus delta, or the S delta, and that triangle should be hanging in the air as well, but could not get, even ChatGPT could not teach me how to make that happen. So you'll just have to bear with my slightly incorrect delta there. So this is just something that shows that reinforcement's not available. Okay. So the confusing part about this is that it's like everything else. Okay. So in the case of the umbrella, right, the rain dropping is a discriminative stimuli, or an SD, for opening your umbrella. Okay. Looking outside and seeing that it's raining is an SD for bringing your umbrella, grabbing it, then being outside, opening it, right? So what gets a little bit confusing is that really everything else is an S delta for this behavior of umbrella opening, right? You look outside and it's sunny. That's an S delta. You check the weather forecast. It's not raining. You walk outside, Chelsea says like, oh, it's not raining today, right? So all those are pretty obvious S deltas. But even things like, a car goes by honking its horn, that's also an S delta for umbrella opening, right? Like you wouldn't like, oh, there's a car honking its horn, I will open my umbrella. Lowry says, oh, live long and prosper. That's also an S delta for umbrella opening. Do you see that? Like that, it's almost like there are almost an infinite number of S deltas for any given behavior. Okay, there's a few SDs, or discriminative stimuli, that say do this, but then there's just, billions, trillions, a tremendous amount of S deltas that say don't do that thing right now. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I saw Chelsea nod, so I'm going to take that as agreement from everybody, because she's the only person I can see. And then differential reinforcement we need to know about, because this is really what's leading to these states of having an SD or having an S delta. Okay, so when a behavior produces more or less reinforcement, okay, that's strengthening and weakening different responses. Okay, so there was a time in your life where rain did not cause you to open umbrella, right? There was a time in your life where saying, all right, honey, what do you want for breakfast? Produced no response from you, because you did not at that point have stimulus control for those responses. But throughout the history of your life, you've learned to be able to respond to, trillions of different things, which is just fascinating to think about. But so differential reinforcement, we use differential reinforcement, but I also want you to think about how our environment, our world, is just constantly differentially reinforcing things. You try things, they don't work. Now it's going to be less likely that you try those things. You try things and they do work. Now it's going to be more likely that you try those things. Okay. Boy, I sure hope it's recording. I think it is. So this is why am I showing you this picture? So this is your first code word, and since this is Halloween, you are going to get treated or perhaps terrified by my 4 favorite Halloween costumes. So this is me as the Grinch. So your first code word is the Grinch. I was pretty proud of this costume because, as you can probably see, it is completely homemade. This is not a Grinch costume that I bought. This was me buying a bunch of fabric and green tights and dressing my pound puppy up as Max. So this is costume number 1, the Grinch. All right, so knowledge check. All right, so let's practice what we just did. So Tommy is, all right, so you're identifying what is the discriminative stimuli, what is the SD. Tommy is sitting on his bed playing with his iPad. The smell of cookies begins to permeate his bedroom, so he runs down to the kitchen and asks for a cookie. All right, what's the primary SD in this situation? Somebody call it out.
Scent?
The smell
The
of
smell?
the cookies.
Yeah, good. All right. I heard at least 2 people say it. The smell of cookies in this case is the SD. Well done. Okay, get rid of those. Sarah with no H. That's just because why did I write that? Well, because I saw Ben Folds in concert a couple weeks ago, and he has a song where he sings about Sarah with no H. So that was the SD that caused me to include that, because obviously you can see that there's no H because it's written. Sarah with no H is driving down the road and notices that her gas tank has a bright red E next to it. She sees an Exxon sign glowing ahead of her, and she pulls into the gas station. This one's a little bit more tricky. What's the SD in this situation?
The Exxon
The red
sign.
E?
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I love that I got 2 answers. Okay, so I got the red E and I got the Exxon sign. And I'm so glad that someone got it right and someone got it wrong, because that gives me the opportunity to talk about it. So actually the answer is, in fact, the Exxon sign. Okay, now, why is the bright red E not a discriminative stimuli for pulling into the gas station? She would not have done that had her gas tank not been red. So why is that not something that chose it? Okay, so that falls under our motivating operations. Okay, so that doesn't signal, the red E doesn't signal that reinforcement's available. Okay, the red E signals that something is needed. Okay, so it tells us, because you wouldn't pull into the gas station, you wouldn't be looking for an Exxon sign or a gas station sign if you didn't need gas. So that's what tells us that reinforcement is needed, or that there is something that motivating operations decrease or increase or decrease the reinforcing value of something, right? So the bright red E tells us that gas is valuable. The Exxon sign tells us that gas is available. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so that's a tricky one. And at the end of the day, when we're talking about working with kids, it's really not, you would need both of those things for the kid, to answer a question. Like, they feel hunger. Ooh, my tummy is hungry, right? So that's the motivating operation that then might lead to them wanting a cookie, right? And you need both of those things. Okay. I could always eat a cookie. All right. So now that we've kind of talked about the concept, let's we're going to move more into teaching. Okay. So understanding stimulus control really is necessary. So this is a discrimination training, and we haven't talked about discrimination training yet, but we couldn't do that until we really understood stimulus control. Okay, because that's really where this discrimination training comes from. And the ability to do basically anything correctly involves, strong stimulus control so that you can discriminate, right? This is how discrimination training is, how we take stimulus control and we make it strong so that they're choosing the right thing in these circumstances. So that's why we spent the first 37 minutes talking about that. All right, so what does discrimination look like? Determining if something is red. Is it red? Yes, no. Okay, saying yes or no. Determining if it's a dog or a cat. A pretty easy discrimination, a pretty early discrimination. Goat or sheep. A pretty difficult discrimination, one that most people cannot do. In fact, even as a farm boy who once again lives on a farm, I could not in every case tell you whether something's a goat or sheep, because it's really minute kind of discriminations. Safe or unsafe, right? So it's something that will hurt me or it won't. Squeal or no squeal. So some of these are games that I play with my social skills groups, or that we play at our group services. So, squeal squeal or no squeal is, should I tell on them or should I not tell on them, right? So is it tattling or is it not tattling? Keep, give, or throw away is a fun game where you're deciding if you should keep something to yourself, either words or actions or thoughts, whether you should give it away freely to others or whether you should throw it away because it's not valuable. Wedding or funeral, what should you wear? What should you say? How should you decorate? What discriminates one from the other? Scary or spooky, or like, well, those are kind of the same thing. Yeah, that's pretty hard discrimination. So if your teacher says you can wear spooky costumes but not scary costumes, that's pretty hard to determine, so we want to be able to discriminate those things. Is that a gorilla? Yes or no? Appropriate or inappropriate? Very important. Star Wars or Star Trek? Very important to some people. Left or right? Should I turn left or right? Is that left or right? Which one will be more fun, right? So there's a lot of different things there. And I told you we're going to get right into teaching, but I have a couple more things, I guess, that I have to show you before we talk about teaching, doing discrimination training. So we want to talk real quickly about stimulus generalization and stimulus discrimination. Okay, so generalization is when stimulus control becomes quote unquote looser, okay, and more stimuli with similar characteristics produce reinforcement. Okay, so if I say a fruit, right, so all of these things here would fall under the category of fruit. Okay, so you're generalizing your response of fruit to multiple things, and this is just 9 cartoonish pictures of fruit, right? You would also have to generalize it to actual fruits and to pictures of actual fruits and to the taste of fruits, so you don't want stimulus, control for the word fruit to just be one thing, right? That would be overly rigid stimulus control. Okay, but we also really want to teach stimulus discrimination when you have tight stimulus control and only one stimuli contacts reinforcement, or a smaller set of stimuli, right? Like you don't want them to only say strawberry in the presence of this very cartoonish picture of a strawberry, right? But you also don't want them to see that full range of fruits and say strawberry to all of them, right? So you need to have both of these things with your learners. They need to have generalization. They need to understand these kind of bigger categories of things, and they also need to discriminate more directly about single stimuli, right? Why do they need to have those? Oh, and they also need to. So thank you for reminding me, PowerPoint. So they also need to know that this cluster of grapes is not a strawberry, right? So, having really good stimulus control involves both SDs and S deltas, right? So they need to know examples and non-examples so they can really understand, so like if I'm teaching kid dog versus cat, I might start with dog and teach them, okay, this is a dog, this isn't a dog, this isn't a dog, this isn't a dog, this is a dog, right? So getting that strong stimulus control in their head doesn't just involve examples, but also non-examples. So having those things is what leads us to having concepts, all right? So having strong stimulus generalization plus strong stimulus discrimination equals concept formation. This is how we get concepts of things. So we go beyond just having examples of knowing things to knowing things, right? Like as the same word, but really understanding. So to really understand what a dog is, like I might see a picture of a German Shepherd dog, right? Oh, great. Okay. But do I understand, why that is a dog and it's not a cat? Do I understand, where dogs like to sleep and what dogs like to eat and, where I might see a dog and if I wanted to buy a dog, so to start getting that, I really need generalization and discrimination. To understand the concept of blue, to not just see a blue circle and be able to say blue, but to say like, oh, their hair's kind of blue, or that, that car is a dark shade of blue. You really need the full concept. Okay, scary. We talked about scary versus spooky. Like, what is scary? If they just see a picture of witch and they say scary, and that's all they can do in relation to scary, like that's a good start, but that is just the very teeny tiny tip of the iceberg as far as what scary goes, because scary is a huge concept. Good versus bad, right? How important is the ability to know good versus bad in your life? You're using it constantly, right? Not just like morally, but also like, is that food good or bad? So we're constantly making that concept discrimination appropriate or inappropriate, right? We really need to know that. That's a huge concept. Friendship. What is friendship? So you get a lot of examples of what friendship is and a lot of what aren't. These are the things that go into friendship. This is what friendship is exactly. These are specific examples of friendship. And so eventually you form this concept of friendship, which feeds into a lot of your life choices and interactions and things like that. So we really want our learners to be able to do all this. This is the wonderful Gina Johnson's beautiful pictorial representation of this concept formation that we were talking about. All right, so for a person to understand bus, okay, so inside the middle circle we have, the perfect exemplar of a bus, right? So particularly in this case, this is really like school bus is probably what it should say, right? So like, when you see that middle picture, you think school bus. Okay, then there's things outside, in that, next level of circle. Those are all also buses, right? So we want them to be able to, nope, Gina was right, of course. This isn't, we don't want the concept to be school bus, because then those next levels would not count. So, that middle thing is kind of like most kids, like perfect exemplar of a bus. Then that next layer, those are all also buses, but look how different they are, right? Look at that, like five decker bus there. Like that looks almost nothing like the middle bus, right? But it is also a bus. But then you also want them to know those outside examples that are outside of busness, right? So you've got a train and a fire truck and an ambulance and something in the top right that I can't see because you guys are covering it, but that's okay, right? So you also want them to know those non-examples, especially the ones that are like what a bus is, so that they can really determine what a bus is. So this is how you determine, this is how you can create part of that concept of bus by teaching really, inside, like exact examples, then, kind of extending to like close, like other examples of the concept that are a little bit less like it. And then also teaching those S deltas that should not produce the response bus, right? So I always loved that graphic. All right, so there's a couple, now we'll talk about teaching. All right, so when we think about teaching discrimination, there's two ways we can do it. So there's simultaneous presentation and successive presentation, right? So in simultaneous presentation, that's when you've got a field, okay? So you've got two or more stimulus that they're choosing between. So we say touch the stormtrooper, and hopefully that one you guys would easily get. The stormtrooper is the one there on the left. Some of you joined late, so you don't know the difference between a stormtrooper and a clone trooper. You're going to be in big trouble once we get further into the slideshow. Put with same, I give you the picture of the stormtrooper. You put it in there. I give you the picture of the stormtrooper, and I have different categories. I have a pile of stormtroopers and I have a pile of clone troopers, and you put it with the other stormtroopers. Okay, so those are simultaneous stimulus presentations where you have a multiple, at least two, kind of in the field. Or successive is one at a time. Okay, so I show you this picture of a stormtrooper and I say, what's this one? And you say stormtrooper. I say stormtrooper, and you say stormtrooper. I show you this picture and I say, is this a stormtrooper? Okay, and you say yes. And then I show you the picture of the Dalek on the side, which is that funny little golden thing with the knobs on it. That's from Doctor Who. And you say no when I say, is this one a stormtrooper? Okay, now if you're thinking to the next step, which some of you might be, you're like, well, Rob, in the real world, there are always multiple stimuli present. So isn't it always simultaneous presentation? The answer to that really is yes. Okay, but I do want you to understand that in the teaching environment, okay, in the vacuum of teaching that we want to kind of achieve, you do want to be able to have, singular stimuli that you're presenting, right? You want to be able to think of it as like, okay, we're really just going from a field of one and saying, what is this? What's this one? Okay. There are, yes, other stimuli present, but your focus is just on that one. So we do want to kind of have that discrimination of our own in here. All right. So what's our general procedure before we look at it kind of more as examples and more specifically? So the first thing we need to do is define what behavior we're looking for. What's our target behavior that we're teaching so that they're discriminating, and what stimulus signals reinforcement. So we're going to say touch clone trooper. Okay. So that's the exact behavior we're going for, is them touching the clone trooper. Okay. Or that's the stimulus that we want to train up. And the stimulus that signals reinforcement is the touching of the clone trooper. So I say touch clone trooper, they hear it, they touch the picture of the clone trooper, okay, and that's what delivers reinforcement. Okay, so that could be a good job, that could be a token, that could be a cookie. We don't need to worry about that part. We're just going to say that's what signals the reinforcement. So once we've decided what we're going for, okay, now we're going to present it. Okay, and in this case, we're going to do go back and remind. So we're going to do a simultaneous presentation here. So we're going to put out 2 or more. Okay, and we're going to reinforce immediately. So I say clone trooper. Okay, and hopefully from this array of pictures, and if you're at home and you want to touch the screen, I touched it. You're touching the middle picture. That's the clone trooper. Good job, Chelsea. Look at you. What a good learner. So you touch the middle picture, okay, and then you immediately get reinforcement, right? So it's really important that you're immediately delivering reinforcement when your learner touches the correct one. Like, fantastic. Okay, now we're going to present an S delta, right? So if they gave the same response, okay, so I put up that same field, okay, but I say touch hockey helmet, right? Now, if Chelsea once again touched the middle picture, or I touch the middle picture, okay, I'm not going to get reinforcement for that because it's not, I gave the same response. I touched the clone trooper helmet, but the discriminative stimuli was touch hockey helmet, right? So in this case, we're teaching that doing the same thing, that we did the last time with a different prompt is not correct. Okay, so you're teaching examples where it's saying where touching the clone trooper is correct, and you're teaching examples where touching the clone trooper helmet is not correct. That is really kind of a semi-confusing kind of thing to think about, is that if I'm trying to teach them to touch clone trooper, I might also say touch hockey helmet, because I want them to only touch clone trooper when clone trooper is present. Hopefully that makes sense, because it is a little bit tricky, and it's again something that we kind of do all the time because we're teaching multiple things. But remember that when you're teaching other things, you're also teaching them what the previous thing is not. So when you're teaching touch hockey helmet, you're teaching them that it's not touch clone trooper. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Good. And then you're alternating these things. You're not just doing a bunch of touch clone trooper, especially keeping it in the same position, and then doing a bunch of SDs. You're alternating them in between, because that's really what's going to build their strong discrimination, not patterns, because otherwise they might just memorize the pattern. And we don't want them memorizing a pattern. That's not really understanding what clone trooper is. That's just memorizing that pattern. Okay. All right. So let's watch a couple quick videos of what discrimination training might look like singularly and then in a group setting. All right, Roldy, ready? Okay. What you put the same. Okay, put the same, so he discriminates which one is the clone trooper.
Can you find the stormtrooper?
Find the stormtrooper.
Yeah, that's the stormtrooper.
Right, he discriminates.
Friends with Han Solo.
Friends with Han Solo.
Yeah, Chewbacca's friends with Han Solo. Where can you see all of these guys? That's right. Here you go, buddy. There's your
okay, so then he discriminates what the whole category is. Okay, so each of those trials he was discriminating, what each of so discriminating which one is the clone trooper, which one is the same, which one is friends with Han Solo, and then what all of these things are. So discriminating that which category they fall into. All right, so there's only two because I only have two children, but here's kind of what it might look like in a group situation.
All right, guys, touch your stormtroopers to show me that you're ready. Thumbs up for cool, thumbs down for not cool. Pantsing your friend at school. That's right, that is not cool. All right, remember, thumbs up for cool, thumbs down for not cool. You meet a new friend at school and you give him your snack. That is pretty cool. All right, show me 6-7. 6-7. All right, nice job.
My obnoxious children with their response to 6-7. I did not realize it was going to be so loud, their response. No, not again. So they're discriminating whether pantsing your friend is cool or not cool. Okay, so I had to coach them that they had to say not cool in that case. Whether it's cool to give your new friend your snap, whether it's and then what they discriminated which one was a stormtrooper. So you can do it in a group setting. It doesn't always have to be with one person. All right, so knowledge check here. A client only responds correctly when cards are in the same position. What's wrong here?
They're going to memorize based on the same positioning.
Yeah. So well done, Chelsea. So instead of them really having strong stimulus control of what that picture is, right? They've memorized where the picture is. So they don't actually know the thing, they know the placement. Good. So we don't have discrimination in that case, according to it. All right. So second code word. This is me as the man in the yellow hat. And there's little Roland as Curious George sitting on my shoulder. So second code word is man in the yellow hat. Love that one. That was fun. We walked around the neighborhood. It was very fun. All right. So how do we know if they're ready for doing some of this stuff? So they need to have some pre-attending skills, right? So they need to orient to the materials. And you can't just say, oh, my kid's not ready for teaching because they don't orient to the materials. You need to work on getting them to orient to the materials. So you can't just wait forever to start your actual teaching. You have to get them to that point. They need to be able to follow simple directives and they need to accept reinforcement, right? So if they will not take reinforcement from you, then that needs to be your primary focus, right? That's why we're pairing, dear friends, right? So we pair so that we are reinforcing, but also so that they will take reinforcement from us. And so we know what reinforcers to use. Okay. We need to have some arrangement of the environment. Okay. So we need to have minimal distractors, especially in the beginning. Okay. Because if there's all kinds of distractors all over the place, then how do they know what to respond to? And we need to have access to reinforcers and materials. They need to be there and ready. And we need to have the ability to prompt them. Okay, so we have to know what their known skills are and we have to know what prompting levels to use. All right, let's do some discrimination training. All right, so for these, I'm going to have you touch your screen. I won't know if you do it or not do it, but that's what I'm going to expect you to do. So you can't actually pick up the picture at the bottom and put it with the one that matches, but you're going to touch the one at the top that's right. And then I'll have one person. Now we're just going to have poor Chelsea, who is my training buddy here. I will have her give the answer. So if everybody could touch the identical one at the top, I'm going to do it too. This one's super easy, right? But this is usually where we start, where we match identicals. All right, Chelsea, which one is correct?
Number one.
Number one. Okay, so these numbers, I have this thing in here. We usually don't put those in the field, right? You might if you were teaching number discrimination, but these are just for purposes of the training because I can't see what Chelsea is touching. All right, so now we're going to move to non-identical matching. All right, so now some of you weren't here in the beginning, but the difference between a clone trooper and a stormtrooper is really in the top of the helmet, right? So do they have a fin or a mohawk? And then in the eyes, do they have two eyes or do they have a T visor? All right, so touch the one that matches the picture at the bottom. All right, Chelsea, which one did you touch?
Number 2.
Oh no, I made it too
No?
hard. It's nope.
It
Who?
looks like he has the fin. Oh, we don't want the fin.
You
So
don't
it's
want the
1.
fin, right? The one at the
We
bottom
don't
has
want
no
the fin.
fin.
It's 1.
Nope, it's not
It's
one
number
either.
3. It's
No?
number
Oh
3.
yes, good
Sorry,
job. Whoever.
I'm having so much trouble with my computer today. I apologize, but I am here.
Hey, Lowry. It's okay. Yes, it is number 3. Well done. Okay, so sorry, Chelsea, for letting you get that wrong in front of everybody twice, but
Seriously.
I did not do good enough discrimination training for you to get you to tell the difference. But yeah, so the one at the bottom is a stormtrooper. You see the smooth dome at the top and 2 eyes instead of a T visor. So yeah, 3 would be the one. So yeah, so that's where it's like, oh, it's not as easy as it looks. All right, so now we're sorting. So on the left, we have a pile of, and this might actually help your brains a little bit because that's what sorting does. So on the left, we have a bunch of stormtroopers. You can see, look how different they are, right? But the things that they share in common, smooth dome, although the one has antlers, okay, but it's not in the middle. Smooth dome, smooth top of the helmet, and they all have 2 singular eyes, right? On the right, those are all clone troopers. You can even see that one that's very scary. And oh, you're like, but Rob, I can't see if he has a T visor. You kind of can. The one that kind of you can see the skull inside of it, but you can see that it has a mohawk. Okay, so all the ones on the right have the fin or mohawk and they have a T visor. Now the one in the top left here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this guy who's kneeling down with his gun, you can't really see his visor, but you can see his fin. Okay, so when I throw up this example, okay, so touch the group that this one belongs in. Touching it, okay. All right, Chelsea, redeem yourself. Left or right? Where does this one go?
Left.
Left, that's right. Okay, so smooth dome, smooth top of the helmet, and 2 eyes, not a T visor. Now you might be saying, like, Rob, sometimes those 2 eyes, like in that first order stormtrooper, this guy, like right here in the middle, they kind of wrap together almost like, like wraparound sunglasses. But yeah, but they don't have the T visor. So well done, Chelsea. You sorted it correctly. And you can see, guys, maybe like I feel like this probably really helps you guys form your concept of stormtrooper versus clone trooper. Okay, because now that you see all these examples, it kind of helps you hone in. And that's what we do with the kids, right? Receptive identification. All right, so just play along with me. All right, touch Sasquatch. And Chelsea, call out the number.
3.
3. Yep, Sasquatch is number 3. All right, touch pizza.
5.
Yeah, touch witch.
2.
Good. Now we're going to get a little bit harder. Chelsea, you ready? All right, everybody
I'm
touch
ready.
clone trooper. Okay. Which one did you touch, Chelsea?
This is my worst nightmare.
I know.
6.
Yes, it is. Chelsea, way to go. Well done. Well done. All right, now touch stormtrooper. Should be easy now that we've done the clone.
1.
1. And that only leaves battle droid, which I didn't teach you, but by process of elimination, you should know that the battle droid must be
4.
4. And I would warrant that maybe Chelsea maybe could have guessed that even if I didn't say it, if she really thought about it, because if she knows that a robot is a droid and a droid is a robot, that's the one that's a robot. Well done. Okay. So how do we get them to being able to do these things? So, they're not just automatically going to know it. So there's different levels of prompting. So we can do what's called verbal instruction, which is what I did for you guys, right? So I told you that a clone trooper has a T visor and a fin or mohawk. And I taught you that it's not in here, but I taught you that stormtrooper has a smooth top of the helmet and they have 2 eyes, or they have kind of 2 eyes that are connected together. So when I say touch clone trooper and we all do it, okay, because I taught you what it was, and Chelsea says the correct answer is
3.
Yeah, 3. It's 3.
They-
Look how
okay.
nervous she is. You're doing great, Chelsea. I'm sorry. Again, you're the only person I can see, so you have to be my guinea
If it
pig.
wasn't Star Wars, I would be more confident here.
I know. That's why I chose this. So that you can really tell. So yeah, 3 is the correct answer. So that was based on, now you guys have had all this other instruction, but in this case, we're assuming that all the kid knows is, all right, you're looking for a T-visor, right? And you're looking for a fin or mohawk on the top of their helmet, which you can barely see his fin in that picture. Now you could use modeling, okay? So the therapist says touch clone trooper, and you're out of the hot seat for a little while, Chelsea, because most of these have more prompting in them. So the therapist says touch clone trooper, and the therapist models it, right? So the therapist touches the clone trooper. Look at that. Oh, wow. Okay. And then we might change the field, right? It's kind of a fancy representation of changing the field. So it's the same pictures, but they're in a different order, okay? And then I say touch clone trooper, and you guys all touch 2. Okay, so that's a modeled prompt. So I showed you what the answer was, and then I had you do it. Physical guidance is more like hand over hand. So I say touch clone trooper, and my hand guides their hand to touch the clone trooper, right? So you have this kind of physical guidance here where you're guiding them towards a correct answer. Spent a lot of time on these silly graphics. Okay, verbal instruction. Now this is wrong. This should be a proximity prompt. I never changed the level of prompting on this one because I copied the slides to make it easier for myself. So this should be levels of prompting, proximity prompt, right? So I say touch clone trooper, and then I move the clone trooper closer to the client, right? And then they touch the one that's closest. Okay, so that's another way to prompt it. All right, your third, we're pretty good for time, friends, pretty good for time. I was getting a little worried because I talk a lot. All right, so my third favorite costume, this was when I was still going to karate every week. This is my Cobra Kai costume from the original Karate Kid movies. When the Cobra Kai members dress up as skeletons for the Halloween dance. And I think I nailed this one pretty good. So Cobra Kai is code word number 3. Okay. Stimulus fading. This is Ashley Agentis's absolute favorite, and it is very, very cool. Okay. So you start by a definitive indicator. Okay. So you say touch clone trooper. And this would be a good way to teach Chelsea, who's really nervous about this. So I say touch clone trooper, and she's clearly going to touch the one that's really heavily circled, okay? And then the next time I do it, okay, or a few times later, I say touch clone trooper, and it's got a less heavy circle, okay? And then I say touch clone trooper, and it's got a really light circle around it, okay? Then I say touch clone trooper, and it's got a dotted line that's getting closer to hard to see around it. And then I say touch clone trooper, and it's got a very difficult to see circle around it, right? And then eventually the hope is that they would be able to touch clone trooper without that stimulus present, the circle. Okay, now some of you hopefully are thinking like, well, Rob, you did a bad job of moving that around. They're going to learn that they're just going to touch the one on the right. You're absolutely correct. And that's why I would be changing the field a little bit more so that they're not just discriminating the placement. But it was like 9:30 last night when I was finishing up this slideshow. So I didn't have that much time. This is, if you didn't notice, I'm really leaning into my nerdiness with this PowerPoint, because now we've got some Lord of the Rings things in here. So the therapist says Samwise touch clone trooper, and Samwise touches the clone trooper. Now in this case, so we're doing observational learning. Okay, so in this case, Samwise is not my learner. Okay, maybe they're another one of my learners. Maybe they're another staff member. Maybe they're another kid who already has this concept. Okay, so I say, good job, Samwise. That's right. Number 3, the third one is the clone trooper. Okay, so that's Samwise touching it. And then I maybe change the field, or maybe I don't. And then I say, okay, Frodo, That's my learner in this case. Touch clone trooper. Okay, so observational learning is very much like when we talk about demonstrating the contingency. So when a kid has really kind of early level skills and you have someone else press the brake button, or you have someone else say, my way, and then you're like, oh, absolutely, my way, and then you let your kid have the brake, they get the reinforcer. This is the same kind of idea. Is they're seeing someone else get the right answer. They're seeing them get some praise, and then hopefully they're following it up by being able to give the correct answer. All right. So transfer trials are how we teach things, right? So this is how we build independence in responding. So ideally, we're using the box on the left. And this should be pretty reviewish for most of you, but it's always good to kind of have that kind of put back in your beautiful brains. So ideally, we're starting with the prompt. So we say touch clone trooper, and we're delivering the prompt. Okay, so I say touch clone trooper, and I point at the clone trooper, or I put the clone trooper closer to them, or I hand over hand I guide their hand to the clone trooper, but I'm giving a full prompt. Then I move to the transfer. And what am I transferring? I'm transferring stimulus control, right? So the stimulus control right now is my prompt, but I don't want them to discriminate based on my prompt. I want them to discriminate based on the stimuli, right? So now I say touch clone trooper with no prompt. Okay, so now Chelsea touches the picture of the clone trooper without me prompting it. Now I want to distract them. I want to move to something else. I say EI, and Chelsea says EI, and I say nice job, and then I move back to check to make sure that the stimulus control is still present. I say touch clone trooper with no prompt. She touches it, and then I deliver reinforcement. Okay, that is our ideal transfer trial. Okay, and even more ideally, you would distract with even more than one thing. Okay, but that really depends on your learner. All of it depends on your learner. But you have some variations depending on whether they're getting it, right? So now I'm working with Lowry, and it takes Lowry a little bit longer and more practice to get things. So I'm going to do this variation. So this is the top right? So I'm giving the full prompt. So I say touch clone trooper, and I hand over hand kind of guide her to touch the clone trooper with a full prompt. Now I'm transferring stimulus control from the full prompt to no prompt. So I say, okay, Lowry, touch clone trooper, and I don't give a prompt, and she touches it. Okay, then I distract her once, and I say, okay, Lowry, clap your hands, and she claps her hands. And then I'm going to go back to the check, but I know I've worked with Lowry a long time, and just going right from the distractor back to a check trial with no prompt, she often gets it wrong. And I don't want her to keep getting things wrong, because then she's practicing the incorrect response. And then she's getting bad stimulus control. She's getting bad discrimination, because now she's not discriminating correctly, right? So I'm going to say touch clone trooper, and I'm going to give her a partial prompt. So then maybe I tap near the clone trooper picture, or I start her hand towards the correct one, and then I deliver reinforcement, because that was more independent than the original kind of prompt. Or I could do the bottom right variation, which is I give the full prompt, okay, then I give a partial prompt, and I immediately deliver reinforcement, okay. Or I give the full prompt, and then I give no prompt, and then I deliver reinforcement. So I don't do a distractor in those cases. So you can do any number of variations to this, but really the one on the left is ideal. Okay, so if we look just back through these responses, in this case, the therapist touches it, they touch it, and then again I say, so for a transfer trial, I would hopefully change the field if possible. And then I would say touch clone trooper without a prompt, and they touch the clone trooper independently. So they're doing it twice. That's the important thing. So going back to this thing here, you see, they're touching the clone trooper 3 times in that ideal situation. So in this case, you're doing the model prompt, they touch it, then you're removing the model prompt, and they touch it again independently. And then you deliver reinforcement, okay? With physical guidance, right? So I have them touch it, and then again, I say, okay, touch clone trooper, and they touch it without the guidance. With proximity, I move it closer, I have them touch it, and then I move it back out to the front, and then I say touch clone trooper, okay? So again, I'm reinforcing more independent responses. All right, so what do we do when there's an error? Okay, an oopsie, right? So basically, you're restarting your teaching trial. Okay, so the error occurs, you say touch stormtrooper, but they touch the battle droid. Okay, so if possible, I'm going to signal a reset. Okay, so I might pull the cards off the table and put them back down. I might just put my hands over the cards. I might put my hand up to signal stop. But really what those things do is signal that they got it wrong without saying no, or that's wrong, or that's not right. So you're signaling kind of the reset. Okay, then you're going to move to a full prompt. You're going to say touch stormtrooper. You're going to point the stormtrooper. They touch it. Then you're going to transfer it. You're going to say touch stormtrooper with no prompt. They touch it. Then you're going to distract them with 1 or 2 or 3 distractions. Then you're going to go back and check. Then kind of this is where like that kind of like teaching mastery has to come in. You're going to decide whether you're going to deliver reinforcement then, or if you're going to go back to what you were originally teaching. Because remember, this was an error. You thought they were going to get it right, and then you had to do this whole process. All right, so what are some variations of all of this? Okay, so you could say touch red in a field of colors, that top right one. You can touch it if you want to. Okay, it's the one all the way to the right. Hopefully you know that. So you could just have a field on the table, okay? And you could have them discriminating one thing in that field. You could say which one says moo, and in this case, you've got like a picture with lots of things in it. Maybe you're looking at a book, okay? And you say which one says moo, or which one is the cow, or, which one has, a flat nose, right? And that's the pig. Which one says gobble, 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 So looking at kind of a picture with lots of different things to discriminate between. Okay, you could do the thing that I showed you before. All right, friends, show me thumbs up if you hear a bird, thumbs down if you hear a dog, and you play them a sound. So you could do, kind of group instruction with multiple responses. Okay, you could do a cool or not cool kind of thing. Your friend invites you to a Taylor Swift concert. You're not a huge fan of her music, but you say yes because you love hanging out with your friend. Cool or not cool. And I'm not going to give you the answer. You can decide. You can teach safe or unsafe. You could say you want to try therapy, but you don't want to tell your parents. So you ask a chat bot to be your therapist, safe or unsafe. And I will definitely tell you that that is unsafe and a very big reality in our world right now. I don't know if you've seen the stories, but they're terrifying. There are occasions where chatbots have told kids to kill themselves. So we do really need to get kids discriminating between safe or unsafe when it comes to online behavior. So these kinds of discrimination trainings are very important to kind of go from the early stages of touch red and which one says moo all the way to is this safe or unsafe, and then for them to answer why, right? That's also discrimination training. All right, so I want you to really think about this concept here. Again, like we started with some buy-in, and I want to kind of go back to some buy-in. So when we think about stimulus discrimination, better discrimination makes you a better learner, right? So the better you can discriminate, the more quickly you will learn things. Okay, so once you can kind of start saying like, does this seem right or does this seem wrong? Does this make me feel good about myself, or does this make me feel bad about myself? Does this feel scary or does this feel spooky? Like once you start getting discrimination, then you start getting more discrimination. Like this learning produces more learning. It's generative. So teaching this stuff ultimately makes you, better a lot of things. It makes you a better friend, right? So knowing when someone is mad, knowing when someone's listening, know when someone is, if they're just being polite or they're actually having fun, knowing when you've annoyed someone or when something's funny, that difference between, there's that fine line between like funny and annoying. That's very important discrimination to have. You can be a better community member. Is this something I can help with? Does that person need help? Can I volunteer? What can I do? What can I offer? Is this something in my skill range? And then just more independence, right? So like knowing what you can eat or not eat. Is this spoiled or okay? Am I capable of doing this? Is this something I need help with? So, discrimination really is everything. Like everything we teach is to create better discrimination. And I think that's very important to remember. And it leads to this forming of concepts. So we're teaching generalization. So we're teaching these kind of broader categories. So you're teaching kind of out like all these things are red. Okay. But it's also stimulus discrimination. Like this one's red and these are not, right? So you're broadening and you're also narrowing so that they can have that concept. Okay, so like all of these things like could be love, all these things feel like love. All of these things are definitely not love. So they can kind of generalize like, yeah, these are love and this is not, this one is, so it's building that concept. All right. So we're talking more about, discrimination training, but we also want to make sure that we're touching on multiple exemplar training to build generalization. Okay, so presenting different stimuli and saying, what's this one? Okay, is this a what's this? So naming them one after another. Is this a clone trooper or stormtrooper? And hopefully you look at all these. These are all one or the other. Does anyone want to be brave and venture a guess as to whether these are all clone troopers or these are all stormtroopers? Must have
I'm
taught
so
somebody.
scared.
There's a mix.
They don't have stormtroopers.
Wait,
Yes.
looking.
There's
No, they
not
are
a,
stormtroopers. Yeah, looking close.
yes, there's not a mix. Well done. These are all stormtroopers. They all look very different, but again, none of them have fins or mohawks. They all have smooth tops of their helmets, except for those antlers. It's a little bit tricky, but that's not in the middle like the fin or the dome. And none of them have a T-visor. Right. So, like doing that multiple exemplar training. So, not stopping at identifying stormtrooper until they could identify all of these as a stormtrooper. And like Chelsea pointed out earlier, it's a difficult and maybe potentially like useless discrimination, right? Like, do our kids need to be able to tell the difference between a stormtrooper and a clone trooper? Almost certainly not, right? Now, if they're huge Star Wars enthusiasts and they're going to go to like the big Star Wars convention, then they should be able to, right? But most kids, this is not good. But, discriminating between, cat or dog, discriminating between, red or blue, discriminating between, safe or unsafe, those things are much more important. And just being able to tell one picture is not going to give them a strong generalized concept of that. So what's this? Is this a stormtrooper? And asking kind of on repeat. All right. So here is my favorite Halloween costume ever. So many years ago, I dressed as Ziggy Stardust, which is one of David Bowie's alter egos. And I had to give you the pre-makeup and hair coloring picture just to show you that was indeed my hair. That's not what my hair always looked like. It was teased up like that. It took a lot of work to make it look like that. But that is my Ziggy Stardust costume. So your fourth code word is Ziggy Stardust. And that is indeed me some years ago. And I, of course, then have to show you this picture from that same Halloween. And so who can discriminate? Who is that person in the middle?
Ashley.
That is Ashley. Who's that person on the left?
Alexis.
That is Alexis. All right. So many, many years ago when we were all just young children like adults, that is all of us at a Halloween event. Me as Ziggy Stardust and Alexis as Eon Flux, and Ashley was like what were the girls that for like the war they would go out and give morale to the troops. I can't remember what they were called, but so we had a good time. Well done. All right, so our final slide here. So which one is the stormtrooper? Left or right?
The one on the
Right.
right.
Oh my goodness, I love that you all responded simultaneously with the correct answer. Yes, the one on the right is the stormtrooper, and I will tell you that in the test out, there definitely is a question about stormtrooper, clone trooper. So remember, the clone trooper has the T-visor and the mohawk. The stormtrooper has a smooth dome and two eyes that are connected in the middle. All right, you guys did a fantastic job. We actually ended a little bit early, and that's not a problem. Here are my references. So most of what I got here was from the Cooper book. So the Applied Behavior Analysis white book, which isn't always white, but we still kind of call it the white book. And there's some other really interesting articles on here that you can check out. And they also have really great reference sections their own, and then the task list, of course, because that's where these trainings are kind of coming from. So, all right, that's the end. I appreciate everybody coming and hanging out today. Where's my record button? Oh boy, I really hope it's still recording. Must be, right? Yeah, there we go. All right, stop recording. All right.
Thanks, Rob.